Hi everyone, welcome back to our number 5 session of this entire series all about Canadian taxes in Dynamics. And in the previous episode, we have reviewed how GST and HST have been calculated on purchasing side, right? And then we are leaving the PST portion within this new episode. That's because we have some specificities in terms of tax posting and some regulatory requirements. So from there, let's first have a quick look at what's the requirement on purchasing PST. So one thing to note, this is really PO or AP invoice related. On the sales side, this is not relevant, right? So let's say if you have a purchase and the GST is relevant for the specific transaction, then everything goes as normal or regular process. The tax 5% calculated should be posted to the tax account 3145 income tax credits. However, if that calculated tax is PST related, then that PST portion should be posted to the PO expense GL account instead of being posted to the tax GL. The reason is the PST on the purchasing side is a non-recoverable tax. So basically, you want to consider that PST portion as part of your cost or expenses on that purchasing. You don't want to consider it as part of the tax. So having said that, a couple of workarounds. So you can no longer use the standard tax code calculation because the system is going to apply that 7% or 6% of PST and post that to a tax account. So a couple of workarounds here. The best way we suggest is to use a charge functionality on the AP side. So key 3 steps I'm listing here. One is we need to create a new sales tax group called purchasing. So P, SK, PST, or P, BC, PST depending on the jurisdiction, and only including GST 5% because on that tax calculation portion, we only want to record 5% of GST. And then we're going to use that charge function to add the PST 6% or 7% on the purchase order, which will be posted to the PO cost accordingly, right? And finally, I will also show you kind of a way to automatically apply that charge code depending on your vendor group. Okay, so from there, let's get started. I'm going to open up the system and we'll start with the step 1. We want to create a new tax group. So for that, I will need to go to tax module. And let's go to sales tax group. Alright, so in my example, I want to use BC, British Columbia. So I have already created one. This is a new group, P representing purchasing. BC is British Columbia, PST, that's only for the PST portion, right? Specificity. And you can see within this group, we only have GST 5%. From the normal BC group, you will see here, BC PST, I'm having 5% GST and 7% for the PST. So this will be used on the sales side. For the purchasing, we should use this group we just created, right? We only want to apply 5%. All right, so this is step 1. Step 2, we will need to configure the charges function to consider that 6% of PST or 7% of PST to be part of the purchase cost. So I'm opening up another tab and then show you the charge functionality. So that's enter accounts payable. Under setup, you have this section called charges setup. So first thing, straightforward, I'm going to create charges code, right? And currently in my case, I create one for PST 6%. I should have changed this charge code to PST 6%, but now I have transactions. I can no longer change that. But just remember this one is 6%, and then have created another one for 7%. In terms of posting, I want to use the debit to record, from the item type, and then for the credit side, it's going to be part of the customer or vendor, right? And then from there, this is almost everything you need, and we can start doing a transaction test on the Business Columbia jurisdiction. So we're going to see how this charge can be applied on a purchase order. So let me open up a purchase order. Okay, I'm going to create a new one and for the same vendor, Home Depot. So in this scenario, I will just use another warehouse transit where I know there is no default sales tax group assigned on the warehouse address level. So in this case, I know the vendor master data, that sales tax group value will be defaulted. So in our case, that should be, I would assume, GST from the vendor side. We can check that in their setup. So you see the sales tax group with GST, but in our scenario, I will manually change that to PST, so that's BC. Basically this group, BC, PST, purchase BC, right? Normally, if you have a vendor with this value as default value, then you don't need to do this manual override. All right, now we need to pick an item so that item sales tax group information will also be applied. Okay, let's continue with this advertising. I added this line and giving a price of 2,000. All right. So now you see the item sales tax group is also assigned. I'm going to save this transaction and we can check the sales tax. So as expected, since this new group only has a GST 5% within it, so that's why you only see this 5% applied with 100 as sales tax. Now for BC, we still have a 7% of PST that I want to consider as part of the cost. How am I going to do that? So basically you come back to your purchase order line and you can find the charge functionality under financials and then maintain charges. So here you can pick the charge code, right? So in my case, that's going to be 7% and category fixed unit. You can just leave it. And category currently is assigned as fixed, but actually from the configuration table, I should have changed this to a percentage, right? And then by default, I'm going to apply a 7% of that transaction. So this can be controlled from your charges configuration. We can make that change later on. So now let's apply the 7% and you have the calculated amount of 140, right? And then you can remove the sales tax group. It's no longer relevant. So let's save this. All right, and then go back one. We can check the current purchase order total. So under purchase order, I will open up this total. I have 2,000 subtotal amount, and then charges 140. That's the 7% of PST, and I also have 100. That's the 5% of GST. And basically, you will continue with a total of 2,240 and basically continue with the confirmation, receipt, and invoice. And finally, on the invoice posting, you're going to see that GST is posted to your tax GL 3145, and then that PST 7% considered as charge is going to be posted to your cost account on this PO. Now let's check this out. So I'm going to confirm it. All right, we'll continue with product receipt and invoicing. Okay, now product receipt is being posted. Okay, we can continue with the invoicing. Okay, now this is invoice. Let's check the voucher. So I'm going to get to the invoice. And then from here, what do you see? Clearly, the sales tax is only 100. That's the GST, right? And all the remaining is going to be posted to the cost side. So to confirm that, we can see view distributions. We can see view accounting. And basically what you're having here, sales tax, this GL account only has 100 GST. And all the remaining is basically recorded to this cost account for purchase expenditure for expense, right? So that's exactly what we expected. All right, so now coming back to our final topic, let's say how user can have a default charge code 7% or 6% for the PST portion without manually selecting that. So to prevent that part of errors, you can actually continue to use that charge code to set automatic charges. So I'm going to show you here. Under automatic charges, you can see under lines I have already created two groups. One is for the PST 7% vendor group. So you can see the account code is going to be group. And then I will assign this value to all the vendors relevant within the 7% PST group, right? And then from there, on the line level, I'm going to include the 7%. So this should not be category. I need to change that on the charge code update. And basically, this can categorize your vendors by their PST group. So when they do PO, all the charge group will be defaulted. So you no longer need to manually select a charge code. This can help you certainly save time and also reduce human errors. All right, so that's everything about this episode. I hope this is helpful. If you have any questions, comments, or other better ways to design this functionality, please feel free to comment, like, and subscribe. All right, thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next episode.